On today's very special episode, as we always must do, and I know that he trades them every 24 hours, right? But we still got to talk about the top prospects in the Padres system. The November update, courtesy of my buddy Aram Leighton, the prospect guru over at Just Baseball. Answer some of your questions about those prospects too.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, the number one sports podcast network in the business. As always, I'm your host with sometimes the most, Javier Reyes, and I've been covering this team for 6 years now. Not just for this podcast, though, various other outlets, including justbaseball.com, which is one of them, and very relevant for today's episode. Today's episode, though, is also brought to you by Game Time. We love this app very much. Download it, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. And on today's show, I feel like he needs no introduction, but I like doing it anyway every time. Co-founder of Just Baseball, host of the Call Up, co-host of the Just Baseball show, and many other things. My buddy Aram Leighton, man, how you doing on this fun Friday spectacular?
I'm doing great. Always fun talking Padres prospects. Even when there's not a ton left, there's still plenty left. So that's the fun part. And I think there's a lot of players I'm excited that could take a leap next year.
Absolutely, man. We're going to talk about that, talk about some potential trade proposals as well, and some questions that we got from listeners. But let's first start with the ballad of Ethan Salas, let's call it. I believe the last time you were on this show, we both kind of, or at least I expressed to you a little bit, just I feel like he was overranked to start. I thought that he was 17 years old, I'm going to say, when I first remember him popping up on prospect boards, and some people putting him as high as 5 and 1, I think, in one case. I'm not even kidding. I don't think that's an exaggeration. And now you have him currently ranked at justbaseball.com. I will link in the description for everybody who wants to check out the rest of the prospects in the top 100. Ethan Salas as number 83 on the top 100 prospects list. What can you say about Ethan Salas, not just in terms of what I just said with the narrative issue I think that I have with him, but just in general as a prospect and the lone prospect that made the top 100 list?
Yeah, it's so tough because now I think because of the maybe early overzealous pushing of him, now you have this slight disdain from some in the industry that are just, or like our fans, or I should say, they're just like, oh, well, yeah, he's never done it, right? Like, well, why do we keep pushing this kid? The reason why is he is such a phenomenal defensive catcher. And everyone that I talk to with different, this is like rival teams and other organizations, is just, they echo the same sentiment. Salas is a top 100 minor league talent because he's still just 19 years old. He has the defensive ability that is so impossible to teach at that. I get 7s on the glove, when he's going to be when it's all said and done. I get that all the time with him. And so you think about like a Patrick Bailey, right? Mm-hmm. Where Patrick Bailey, and he's one of the best defensive catchers in the game. But if Salas is 70-80% of that, which I think he has a chance to be, he does not need to be very good offensively to be not only an everyday catcher, to be a good everyday catcher. Patrick Bailey's a multi-war player every single year.
Whether 3 wins last year, yeah.
Yeah, whether you love the archetype or not. I think that's where you look at Salas and you just say the offensive barrier to be an everyday catcher is so low. And there's just not a lot of defensive catchers like that. There's so many catchers that I look at, especially teenage catchers, that have so many components to their game that they need to shore up, and he doesn't. And it's not like he isn't capable as a hitter as well. Like, there's clearly the upside to be a better hitter than Patrick Bailey. There's also the downside that he never hits enough to really be able to be that big league catcher. But I think it's unlikely because he just hasn't had a fair shot. I still go back, and it's the most recent stint that I've really been able to see of him is that Arizona Fall League, and being able to see him out there, I came away so encouraged. And then he had the back issue that really just wiped out 2025 and made it a lost year. But I really felt like that Fall League was going to, carry over into some success in 2025. But even then, right, he's 18 years old still. And it's like, all right, time to settle into AA, I guess. He's never really had a chance to. So, and it's the age-old question now with the Salases, because you have his brother now, and Andrew Salas with the Marlins org, who was 16/17 years old and didn't play that well in low A, but played. And so it was impressive that he played there. It's like, what are you supposed to see results-wise
Mhm.
for somebody that is playing at a level they shouldn't be playing at, no matter how talented they are. Like, what are you supposed to look for? What do you want to see? And poise is the answer, and we continue to see poise from Salas. So if the glove's a 70, he really only needs to be a 650 OPS guy to be a really good big league catcher, and I feel like he's going to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think that with him, the other thing is just, and we say this every time, but just the development of catches is weird. And I just don't. I just still remember when that ranking happened. I remember we were texting about it a little bit. It just felt way, way, way too high. I remember. Did you rank him in like 30s? I think initially.
And people thought I was crazy. Yeah, like in the 30s, like how do you not have him as a top 15 prospect? Whatever. I was like, because we got to see him do it. It's early, but the floor is so high, and I think that's where the private versus public conversation, right? Like what's the conversations with teams, and this happens all the time because it's two different worlds, and they have information that it's just no one else is going to be able to have. The conversation around teams and why they love Salas so much was the floor. But typically when you see a 17-year-old prospect that's ranked really high, you assume that it's because of the ceiling. But it was because of this rare floor that you get from a 17-year-old, with then obviously a little bit of ceiling too. But teams were so high on him because of the floor. But I don't think that was conveyed then publicly. And then publicly it became, oh, well, this guy can be a star, right? Because he's already so highly regarded as a teenager. And no, this was just a really unique circumstance where we had a teenage prospect who just had a relative high floor. So that's where I think there was a little bit of that miscommunication, and people never really knew how to properly look at Ethan Salas, which is, I don't think it ever was going to be superstar, 30 homers, whatever. I think you saw a guy that he could be 20 homers and he could hit 275 with good OBP, and then with an elite defensive profile. That's one of the best catchers in the game still. And that's the point of the defense. And what it always goes back to there.
Absolutely. And I think what I like to emphasize on my show is just, I don't think this guy's Buster Posey or anything like that. You have compared him to potentially Gabriel Marino type, if the bat develops, just that average guy. And I think that Padres fans, it's worth remembering that this is a team that has struggled with catcher for so long. Since 2018, they have the 5th lowest wins above replacement according to Fangraphs amongst catchers, all of their catchers, with only the Rockies, Nationals, Angels, and White Sox being worse. For a team that has spent as much money, for a team that is as big and contending, in theory, as the Padres, that's quite bad, right? So for me, I just look at this and say, it's really good that they kept him at the deadline. I'm hoping that they don't trade him, because I just don't think that Freddie Fermin is going to be this high upside superstar. I think he's an incredible backup, and I think he fits the mold for now. But for now, I just think Ethan Salas is a lottery ticket that, if you called him up, Patrick Bailey had a 70 WRC plus last year and was 3.2 wins above replacement. Like, if Ethan Salas is any of that, this is going to be the best catcher that the Padres have had for a while. And for once, a player that will be under club control, which is why I emphasize with every Padres fan listening to this to not give up yet, because it's too early. And hey, I remember when Mackenzie Gore, everybody was done with him. And I understand that was totally different, because he actually literally was killing it, and then just, I don't know what the heck happened. I still don't know what happened. And then, but look at him now, right? Like a pretty good pitcher, a guy who's on the trade market, sure, because the Nationals are weird, but all in all, still ended up being okay. I just think that there's an ebb and flow with some of these things, and catcher is the hardest to evaluate.
Well, and you mentioned catcher development already is, and then the Padres look great scouting. They're not the best developers, right? Like, they're not the best at getting guys right and getting the most out of them. And so with a guy like Salas, like, that might happen at the big league level. Like, he may not have never fully put it together until he's up there, and that's okay, because you're still getting value. Like, the last thing I'll say on him is, look at like a Bo Naylor. He's still trying to figure it out, right? Like, he's still trying to figure it out offensively at the big league level. And he's been a little, and at points, I think, very disappointing. He's still like a 1.5 win catcher every single year, the last 2 years. So, and that's like the worst case scenario. I think that's like, that's why I feel like Salas just has such a good chance to at least fill that catcher role. And look, I guarantee you that AJ Preller has said no on Ethan Salas a lot of times, and AJ Preller doesn't say no that often. So, like,
no, he does not.
There's a reason why.
Absolutely bad. But aside from Ethan Salas, do the Padres have any other prospects that are worth talking about? That is the age-old question. But you never know, because this team, despite what all the haters say, they are very good at replenishing the farm system. We're going to talk to Aram about the depth of that farm system and whether or not there's any hope for next year. But first, got to take a second to talk to you about the title sponsor of today's show. That is Game Time. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994. Aram's a big soccer guy, so he's really excited for it. But it's hard to get tickets, right? It's going to be really stressful and all that. That's why the Game Time app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands. It makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. They've got a seat view. You can pull up the app for their zone deals section. You pick a section, they pick a seat, you save big. And just in general, there's so much less stress. That's why I love Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. But again, download the app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, and go with Game Time. And just like that, everybody, here we are back on the Locked On Padres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from, because after all, Aram, what is it? The number one sports podcast network in the business. We just talked about Ethan Salas, but now let's discuss some of the rest of the farm system. And before I let you cook and just give a couple names, your rapid fire way that you've been on this podcast a lot to talk about some of the other guys to keep a name on, maybe they vault into the 100 at the end of the year, because that always happens. I'm not biased. This happens all the time. Everybody stop leaving me bad comments. I'm not lying. Nobody knew who Jackson Merrill, or no one cared about Jackson Merrill for a while, and nobody cared about a lot of Padres prospects for a while until they ended up mattering, right? Tucker Musgrove. There was a tweet from a guy that we both love, at TJ Stats, Thomas Estico, who said he was playing around with some pitch similarity scores and found that the closest MLB comp to Tucker Musgrove's fastball is Jacob deGrom's fastball. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is what I'm talking about. The Padres don't need starting pitching because they already have a young Jacob deGrom in their system. What can you tell us, though, about Tucker Musgrove and the hype that I feel like not just this tweet, but has been building around him, which admittedly, maybe the last May Musgrove is helping out with that. You know what I mean? Just a tiny bit for Padres fans. But what can you tell us about Tucker and any other guys to keep an eye on in terms of the farm system depth?
Well, and I think this is what the Padres do really well, right? Like they're going to find these late round, non-drafted, pitchers here that end up becoming, interesting assets. And I think Musgrove is just another arm that didn't come with even a ton of I think fanfare, but clearly has, I think, some pretty unique stuff. And I think anytime you start comparing pitches like that, it's always you set up fans to get a little reckless. But I understand why, because especially if you were just looking at the one-inning spurts in the AFL, where, I mean, when Musgrove was in the Arizona Fall League, his fastball was arguably one of the best pitches, that we saw out there. I mean, he was sitting 98 miles an hour, just overwhelming hitters with that. And then it's a four-seamer up top, and it's that carry from like a flatter release that is deGrom. I think why he had the deGrom comp there, and then a sinker off of that and a slider. Like, this is a type of arm that either he's gonna dominate, I think, the lower levels, and then it's similar to the conversation of like a Tyson Neighbors, where okay, he's so good that you either fast track him to the big leagues or you have him as a trade chip now all of a sudden too. So now Musgrove's stuff I thought looks really good, and is probably going to be another one of those emergent relief prospects in that system.
Absolutely, man. I'm excited for it. And again, I really do just think that the Pods, they just take high upside guys. It seems like some high school kids, they take Cruz Schoolcraft, they have Cash Mayfield. It just seems like this is what they do. And whether or not their thing is, hey, we don't know how to develop, but we know how to scout. So that's why we like trading everybody, because we're like, you guys do the rest. We'll take your really good players now. That's been the team's philosophy. But bottom line, the end result is the same, which is that the Padres have had a really good knack of redeveloping their farm. And I think that says a lot in a sport where they're actually really trying to compete. And then there are other teams that have been bad since I think I first met you that still don't have that many prospects that I see making an impact, right? The A's, good example. I know they have Leo DeVries right now, but other than that, I just think that it's commendable for sure. What do you think though? Do you think that there are any other guys in the top 10? Bradley Rodriguez, Cash Mayfield, and Cruz Schoolcraft, Jagger Haynes, I don't know who, right? Like anyone like that. Lamar King Jr., I think we talked about last year. Any guys that you could see maybe sneaking into or being talked about for being in the top 100 by the end of the year?
Oh, Jorge Quintana, I could see. So Quintana,
Okay.
they acquired from what would have been the Brewers.
Yes.
And, immediately in Padres fashion, okay, we just acquired him. Let's throw him right into low A. And he was 17 years old at the start of the season, 18 years old. He doesn't turn 19 until May. But he's a really fun player that I know a lot of people, in the industry are excited about. Switch hitter, good tools at shortstop. You have above average speed. I think that the hit tool really took a big step forward. He had some really exciting stretches. I think even just in handling low A, in making that leap. I know it wasn't great numbers, but there were some stretches of good games where I think you just saw the skill set and the tools there. So Quintana's a guy that I just think could take a leap next year. I think a lot of scouts like the way that he goes about his business, and there's room for strength and other aspects of his game. I'm a big Bradley Rodriguez fan. I know he's more of a big league guy at this point, but I think that's a guy that is just going to be a good option for them. I think when you look at Miguel Mendez, because I think Cruz Schoolcraft is the obvious answer, right? In terms of you draft a guy in the first round who's a 6'8" lefty, you hope that that's a guy that makes a big leap. But I like Humberto Cruz and Miguel Mendez, and I've talked a lot about Cruz, and I think they've been careful with him, which is also rare. I think because they know what the capabilities are with Cruz, and didn't want to manage the workload. But Miguel Mendez, I mean, he averaged 97 miles per hour with his fastball last year, and that pitch was solid within the zone. And then his slider was an easy plus pitch. He mixed in a changeup that looks like he can be a solid third, which I think gives him some runway, as a starter. And he was successful in doing so. But I think also has the fallback with that fastball slider combination of being a leverage arm. So there's just another big leaguer here. He's wiry, athletic. It's just a live arm there. And they added him to the 40 to protect him from the Rule 5. And he'd only made a few starts at Double-A. So Mendez is a guy that I wouldn't be surprised jumping into that top 100 conversation. If he's able to show a little bit more feel for the changeup, just cut down that walk rate a little bit more, because that 3-pitch mix is legit.
Absolutely, man. And really quickly, because I don't think that this is the case, but we did get a question from one of the listeners of the show saying, question for your show with Aram Leighton, is there any chance that there's any pitcher in the Padres farm system who can make a Trey Yesevich type of jump in 2026? Of course, I feel like this is going to be the new, classic analogy player that gets brought up all the time, is who's the new Trey Yesevich, who's the new this and that, right? Who's, and to a degree, who could be in the next Jackson Merrill, guys that come in and are immediately good. Do you think there's any chance of that, or is this just really more of a farm system that is slowly like a farm? You plant your crops and you're waiting for it to grow.
Yeah, I think in terms of a starter, it would, Mendez would be the guy that maybe if it all clicked, right? He's spotting that change up, and you've got 97 with a heater, a plus slider, and then a changeup that's looking plus. And, that the Padres won't waste time if they need an arm to bring him up, and he's going to be at Double-A. That would be theoretically the guy that could do it. It wouldn't look like Yesevich, but I think a higher probability answer is Bradley Rodriguez just ends up becoming this fantastic leverage arm for them. And, he makes just this huge leap and is a huge asset for them. I think that's the most likely, if we're just asking who's someone that can get up and make a big impact, for this big league team. I think it would be Bradley Rodriguez, who was just fantastic, throughout the season. When he came back from injury, because he missed some time in July, or in August, July and August. He came back at the end of August, and it was a 2.40 ERA. I know he walked some guys, but for the most part, just keeping runs off the board, missing bats, a good clip, and he's just gets a lot of ground balls as well. And I think that's the other wrinkle that I really like about him. And I always wonder if they would ever consider trying to stretch him out a little bit more because of the ability to get ground balls. I just think he's a really unique weapon for them. So I think that's a guy that's going to help them at the big league level next year. But theoretically, I guess Mendez would be the best guess.
Got it. Absolutely. And yes, Bradley Rodriguez, 1.17 ERA and 7 2/3 innings this past year for the Padres. It is why I am not worried at all. And I don't think Padres fans should be either about the bullpen. Sure, it might not be as obscenely good as it was last year with the loss of Robert Suarez and potentially with Mason Miller moving to being a starting pitcher. But overall, with guys like Bradley, with even guys like Sean Reynolds and my boy Niebla, cooking and still teaching, I do think that at the very minimum, maybe we could see Padres bullpen still be and have some stars rise out of it because they've been low-key very good at that for the past few years. But before we conclude today's show, guys, I want to ask Aram about trades. I want to ask him about a trade with his favorite team because why not? That's what we do. That's literally all we do. It's the offseason and nothing happens. It's really sad sometimes. But we're going to talk about that, guys, in just 1 second. First, let me tell you guys about FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. Sometimes there's a streak of great games. Arm's favorite team, the Dolphins, all of a sudden, not the joke of the league anymore. It's great. And guess what, guys? When it comes to live betting, FanDuel is the place to go. It's great. When the game starts to shift, a receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover, FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. Live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. Player props update as guys heat up. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com to place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. And just like that, everybody, we are back here, thriving and vibing as always. The waiting moments of Locked On Padres. My guy Aram Leighton here on the show, the prospect guru and the Marlins guru, for better or worse. But I want to talk to you about the Marlins because recently linked, Jeff Passan did an article talking about like most likely guys to get traded. And one player that was mentioned, and I talked about this on my show earlier this week, everybody could go check that out, was Jake Cronenworth. And one team that the Padres had been connected to for potential trade targets was the Marlins with Edward Cabrera. And I texted you about this. You didn't think that it was a match. I don't know if it's a match either with Edward Cabrera and Jake Cronenworth. And in general, I got a response. A friend texted me saying, hey, man, it's the Marlins. Whatever. Just trade them nothing and they'll give you something great. I will say, and you've been talking about this a lot, I know on Just Baseball and the show, the podcast, and your writing, et cetera, that the new GM of the Marlins seems to have a really good look at things. And the Marlins were very quietly, while not very good last year, obviously, they were fun. Griffin Codine, a bunch of different guys that kind of debuted were at least making the team exciting. And at least you saw some area there. And Edward Cabrera, well, yes, I think the Padres will take anybody with a pulse when it comes to filling out their rotation at this point. Edward Cabrera was just genuinely pretty good, at least in terms of the raw numbers, right? Last year, 3.53 ERA, a FIP of 3.83. That's like really quality stuff. So I'm wondering, do you think that it would take Jake Cronenworth and a prospect? Do you think that there's any type of trade connection that these two teams can make? Or do you think that the Padres are once again just kind of like, I don't know. I mean, it is AJ Preller and all that, but do you think that there's any type of possibility that they make a trade like this?
I mean, it makes sense in theory, because I think the Marlins, they took a step forward last year and, like you said, they weren't great, but, they were mathematically alive in the final week of the season. And I don't think anybody would have expected that from this Marlins team, especially on how things went last year. Right. So like much better than you would have thought. I mean, Stowers and Marcy and all this stuff. And they have Yuri Perez and Sandy bounce back in the second half. So they feel like they can maybe build on that a little bit. And I know that their pursuit right now is a veteran bat, and they're okay spending a little bit of money. My question is, what is your perception on that, Cronenworth contract? Obviously, it looks less bad now that he came off of a much better season last year. It's 12 it's like 12 and a quarter for the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5
so he's 37,
years.
I believe. I just checked that though.
Is that contract underwater? Like what kind of it's not a lot annually, but does anybody want that liability for 5+ years? That's where I struggle to figure out the value because I know the Marlins, I think they'd be interested in a player like him, but are the Padres paying that down a little bit? if Edward Cabrera is going the other way, do the Marlins get something else on top of that? I think it's a good fit because Cronenworth can move around. They can throw him at first base. And he's been a really solid player. I think now you look at 2023 and say that's more of the outlier, right? So that's the positive part. I don't think it's underwater if you assume he's going to do this long, but I think Cabrera is so cheap. It's almost a perfect fit for the Padres, right? You're getting an arm that is just under control and really, really cheap, like low ARB number, even relatively speaking. I just wonder if they'd have to attach a little bit more the Padres. And I mean, that might be fine. Like, maybe they can do that, but it would clear up some money for the Padres too. Cause I still think, Edward's going to be cheaper than 12 million by a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the Marlins starters, I looked at Braxton Garrett for a second too. That just the guys that can fill innings, and then get off the Cronenworth contract. Maybe that makes it a little bit more worth it for the Marlins. He's such a weird player because the contract was so unnecessary when it was given out. In terms of you still had years of control, you just paid Xander Bogaerts and they extended this guy. Now that's a whole another topic about like the Padres trying to establish themselves as a destination. Maybe they have to overpay more than other teams. I know the Dodgers fans don't like hearing that it's harder for other teams sometimes to do stuff, but that is the reality. Cronenworth, here's my thing. I think that he could have defensive value. I know he wasn't very good last year, but he was playing first base and he just wasn't a first baseman to me. And the Padres have been doing this for a while where it's like Luis Arraez is playing first base. Now, frankly, I think that was just because he hurt them there the least. But it's just, I just think back at second base, he has more value. I even think that he could be, he could play shortstop every now and then when you need him to, right? I just think that he is a guy that is never going to swing at bad pitches. He puts together really productive at-bats, 7th in pitches per plate appearances last year, or 9th, one of the two. I think he'd just be this nice veteran sort of player. Who's had some playoff success, by the way, against the Dodgers and previous years. He's had some good moments. So I could see him being moved. I think it would make sense. I think he's the definition of solid. I think that there's some upside here. And I also think it's interesting because before this year even started, there were teams reportedly that were interested in Jake Cronenworth. I think teams know that he's not a first baseman, that's not where he should primarily be. I think they know that he should be placed throughout the infield. And that's where you get more value. And I don't think it's a coincidence that he had his best WAR total in like 3 years this past year, playing mostly second base. So I think it all depends, man. I think it all depends. Obviously, everyone thinks that Tatis is getting traded. We are on year 4 of Tatis being traded. It still hasn't happened. Me personally, I don't think it'll happen. But I think that there's a match here. You did steal Jacob Barcia from us, though. I will say, that is really frustrating. I brought up Griffin, I brought up him. Kyle Stowers was great too, but Jacob Barcia, 133 WRC plus last year was really, really frustrating to watch, frankly, because I was like, I don't even remember when we gave this guy up, but I know that he was a Padre. So yeah, look, sometimes it doesn't go your way, but I do think that the Marlins and Padres, they've definitely at least shown that they make trades together.
Yeah, and I think like there's different iterations too, right? You could maybe look at the Braxton Garrett direction and say, okay, well, maybe they can work out a trade that way. And there's definitely synergy there. So I think there's a possibility of them being able to work something out, and it would make some sense, to be honest. But if the Edward Cronenworth plus move, I think could make a lot of sense for both teams. So I know the Marlins want an established big league bat, and the reality is, that might be a contract that they're not jumping out of their chairs to go pick up. But if they are canvassing the free agent market, you're not going to get anybody for less than 12 million AAV. So as long as you think that Cronenworth's game's not going to age terribly, and I don't think it would, with the versatility, with the way he controls his at-bats, I think
really good walk rate last year, one of the best walk rates in baseball, and also second base stinks right now. And I think
it's a
that's
terrible
worth
position.
Yeah,
and
he's
the Marlins
the
have to
7th
figure it out
by WAR. Yeah,
the Marlins would have to figure it out because they have like Xavier Edwards and whatever. They need a third baseman, so maybe who knows? Maybe Cronenworth could get a little reps at third and see what happens. But I am interested to see. I think there is some synergy there.
Absolutely. That will be something to keep an eye on. And I do think that out of all the trade partners that I've heard, this is one that seems to have a little bit more legitimacy, other than, say, everyone asking me about what's that dude's name? Freddie Peralta out of Milwaukee, or even worse, Tariq Skubal. No, that's not happening. Stop asking me about Tariq Skubal. When they had the Soto trade, all right, yes, they could have pulled it off then. No, stop. Stop, please. I get it so much.
Needs to be going the other way or something. And what you can't do for 1 year of Scooble, it's just not going to happen.
Please stop doing this. Please. I think there's other teams that would give up more. But as always, man, a blast having you on the show. If there's anything you'd like to plug, feel free to plug that for Just Baseball on the call up or whatever you got going on.
Yeah, we're going to be doing our Playing GM series, so we'll be breaking down, what we think each team should do on the off seasons on the Just Baseball show. We just did our 1,000th episode, so that was really fun. And then I'll be breaking down team top prospect list as well. Like we're continuing to update our team top prospect list, so the Padres will be updated soon. And there's actually some fun prospects that we talked about that I'm excited to dive into still, even if droves of players get sent the other way. So I'm excited about that. You can check that out on the call up and justbaseball.com. And I'm looking forward to continuing to crush the offseason. Our staff's been doing an amazing job.
Absolutely, bad. And with that all being said, that about does it for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember to leave your questions or comments in the YouTube comments section, and I will get to them, especially on Monday for the Monday mailbag. We've got catching breakdowns. Can the Padres trade for Adley Rutschman? We'll be talking about that next week, as well as some other signings. Unfortunately, we will also be talking about Luis Campusano and the catching thing, by the way. Spoiler alert. Unfortunately, we have to. We're at that stage. We're on year 7 of Luis Campusano discourse, among other things we're going to be doing next week. Until that next time, though, stay safe and, of course, stay faithful. My Friday Faithful homies, go check out Just Baseball and more. We'll see you next time.